I never thought the people who gave me life would one day stand against me like enemies, but that was exactly how it felt the night my parents sat me down in the living room and delivered their ultimatum. My mother's voice was sharp, her words heavy with disappointment, while my father stared at me with eyes that no longer carried warmth. "If you don't help your sister, Lily, we'll have no choice but to cut you off," my mother declared, as if cutting me off was not from their love or approval, but from the family itself. I remember sitting there frozen, my hands pressed into my lap so tightly that my nails dug into my skin. It was not just a threat, it was a betrayal I could feel burning in my chest. For a second, I thought I had misheard them, that surely my own parents wouldn't corner me like this. But they repeated it, slowly, deliberately, as if ensuring I would never forget those words. The house I had worked so hard to build suddenly felt like a cage, every wall pressing closer as they demanded I sacrifice my stability for Rachel once again. Rachel, the sister who had always lived recklessly, who gambled with her life and money, who never once considered how her choices left ripples of destruction for the rest of us. My parents looked at me as if I were the cruel one for not immediately bending to their will. I stared at their faces, my mother's tense jaw, my father's folded arms, and felt the weight of years of unequal love settling in that one moment. I had always been the responsible one, the steady one, the daughter who never asked for anything, and now I was expected to lose everything to protect a sister who had squandered every chance given to her. I tried to speak, my voice trembling as I asked them why I was the one forced to pay for Rachel's mistakes. My mother's answer cut through me like glass. "Because you can. Because you have what she doesn't. That's what family does." The logic twisted like poison in my veins, because what she really meant was, Rachel deserves saving more than you deserve peace. My father nodded silently beside her, his silence speaking louder than words, confirming that they were united against me. In that moment, I realized the love I had always hoped for from them came with conditions that favored one daughter while discarding the other. My heart pounded so hard I thought they could hear it. I wanted to scream, to demand fairness, to remind them of all the times I had carried my own burdens without asking for help, but instead, I sat still, my silence betraying my anger. Memories of childhood raced through me, Rachel being rescued from her failures, Rachel being defended when she lashed out, Rachel being rewarded while I was left in the shadows. It was happening again, only this time the cost was higher. They weren't just asking me to forgive her, they were asking me to surrender my future for her. When I refused, my mother's expression hardened in a way that made me flinch. "Then don't expect us to be there for you when you fall," she hissed. My father leaned forward, his eyes narrow and cold, and added, "You'll regret this, Lily. Families stick together, but if you step away, you'll be alone." The words felt like knives, meant not just to warn me, but to slice away at the person I thought I was. Alone. They wanted me to believe that without them, I would have nothing. And for the first time in my life, I saw the truth. I had been alone for years, even with them standing beside me. I walked away from that conversation with my chest tight, and my eyes stinging with unshed tears. Outside, the night air felt heavier than ever, pressing against me as if trying to suffocate the choice I was being forced to make. I wanted to collapse under the weight of it, but some small ember of defiance kept me standing. The voices of my parents echoed in my head like a curse. "Cut you off. Alone. Regret." I gripped the railing of my porch until my knuckles turned white, wondering if there would ever be a way to escape the chains of this family without shattering completely. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with questions I didn't want to answer. Could I survive without my parents' approval, without the family I had clung to despite their cruelty? Was I really strong enough to stand alone, to protect what I had built for myself? Every doubt they had planted in me over the years bloomed like weeds, choking me from the inside out. Yet beneath the fear, there was a flicker of anger that would not die, a flame that whispered that I deserved better than being treated as Rachel's safety net. In the darkness, I thought about Rachel herself. Did she even know what our parents had said to me? Or had she sent them like messengers to do her bidding, confident that once again the burden would fall on me? I pictured her, carefree and careless, while I sat with my world collapsing. The unfairness of it made my hands shake. I wasn't just being asked to help. I was being ordered, manipulated, and punished for daring to resist. It wasn't love, it was control, and in my heart, I knew that control could no longer rule me. By morning, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. My eyes were red, my lips trembling from exhaustion, but behind them, there was something sharper, stronger. I whispered to myself that I couldn't let them win, that I had to find the courage to choose myself, even if it meant cutting the ties that had defined me since birth. But as the sun rose, one truth terrified me more than anything else. I wasn't just fighting Rachel's debt. I was fighting years of silence, years of neglect, and years of being invisible. And now, for the first time, I had no idea what the cost of fighting back would be. The morning after their ultimatum, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee as if it could give me answers. My parents' words still rang in my ears, each syllable dripping with betrayal. I had always believed family meant protection, but now I saw it was a weapon they wielded against me. My phone buzzed on the table, Rachel's name flashing on the screen, but I let it ring. I couldn't bear to hear her voice, not after the storm my parents had unleashed on me. When the call ended, a text followed. "You'll do the right thing, Lily. I know you will." My blood boiled. The assumption, the entitlement, it was as if my choices had never mattered at all. That day, I drove to work in silence, the city around me buzzing with life while my mind replayed every injustice I had endured at the hands of my family. It wasn't just about money. It was about years of being invisible, years of being the backup plan, the steady daughter who never faltered. I parked outside my office and sat there for 10 long minutes, gripping the steering wheel until my palms hurt. Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to let them corner me anymore. For once, I was going to draw a line so sharp it could cut through every manipulation they had thrown my way. When I arrived home that evening, the house felt colder, emptier. My parents' voices haunted me. Rachel's text gnawed at me, and I knew that if I didn't act soon, I would drown under their control. I opened my laptop, my fingers trembling as I typed a search. Legal options, family disputes. A dozen results appeared. Lawyers who specialized in property rights, family law, and inheritance conflicts. My heart raced. I wasn't sure if I was ready to take such a drastic step, but the truth was, I had no other choice. They had drawn the battle lines. I had to decide whether I would fight or surrender. The decision came faster than I expected. Within hours, I had scheduled a consultation with an attorney named Daniel Harris. His voice over the phone was calm but firm, and something about the way he spoke gave me the first flicker of safety I had felt in days. "Don't worry, Lily. You have rights. They can't force you to sacrifice your home for your sister's mistakes," he assured me. I clung to his words like a lifeline, my chest tightening with a strange mix of relief and fear. This was real now. I was no longer just imagining resistance. I was preparing to fight. The night before the meeting, I tossed and turned, my mind replaying every scenario. What would my parents say when they received a legal notice from me, their own daughter? Would they rage, or would they finally see the damage they had caused? I wasn't sure. All I knew was that this step might sever us forever. I stared at the ceiling, whispering to myself that I deserved peace, that I deserved to live without being chained to Rachel's chaos. Yet, beneath the resolve, my heart ached. They were my parents, and no matter how cruel they had been, part of me still longed for their approval. The next day, I walked into Daniel's office with my heart pounding so hard, I thought everyone in the lobby could hear it. He listened to my story without judgment, his pen gliding across his notebook as I poured out years of neglect, favoritism, and manipulation. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "It's time to protect yourself. We'll draft a legal notice that makes your position clear. You will not sell your house, and you will not be coerced into paying for your sister's debt." His words sliced through the fog in my head. For once, someone was standing with me, not against me. When the notice was finally drafted, I held it in my hands, the weight of the paper almost unbearable. It wasn't just ink on a page, it was a shield, a declaration that I would no longer bow to their threats. My fingers trembled as I signed it, but as the pen left the paper, I felt a surge of power rush through me. For years, I had been the quiet one, the obedient daughter who never raised her voice. Now, with one signature, I was breaking free of their chains. That night, as I placed the sealed envelope on my desk, I couldn't stop shaking. It was fear, yes, but it was also liberation. I imagined my parents' faces when they received it, the disbelief, the anger, the realization that I was no longer theirs to control. Tears streamed down my face, not of regret, but of release. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was choosing myself, even if it meant losing them. The silence of the house wrapped around me like a blanket, heavy but strangely comforting. As I prepared to send the notice the following morning, I whispered a silent prayer, not for reconciliation, but for strength. Strength to endure their wrath, their disappointment, their silence. Strength to walk away if they forced me to. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and saw a woman who was terrified but unbroken. A woman who was finally learning that love without respect is not love at all. The battle hadn't even begun, but deep down, I knew one thing. I was ready to fight. The notice was sent on a Thursday morning, and by Friday evening, my phone was a storm of unanswered calls. My parents had tried ringing me 17 times in a single day, their desperation turning into anger with each voicemail they left. I didn't listen to them at first, but curiosity gnawed at me until I pressed play. My mother's voice was sharp, almost venomous. "Lily, how dare you do this to us? To your family? You've lost your mind. We raised you, and this is how you repay us?" Each word cut deeper than the last. I deleted the message before I could hear more. It was easier than allowing her words to claw at my resolve. Rachel's call came next, and this time, I foolishly answered. Her tone was not one of a sister seeking comfort, but of a dictator issuing commands. "Lily, undo this. Right now. Mom and Dad are furious, and you're making everything worse. You don't understand. I'm in real trouble. If you don't help me, I'll lose everything." I clenched my jaw, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. For years I had carried her burdens. This time, I told her the truth she never wanted to hear. "Rachel, I don't owe you my life." The silence that followed was deafening. By Saturday, my parents were at my doorstep. I saw their car pull into the driveway and my stomach lurched. For a moment, I considered not opening the door, but the pounding on the wood was relentless. When I finally let them in, my father's face was crimson, veins bulging at his temples. He waved the legal notice in the air like it was a personal insult carved into stone. "What is this nonsense, Lily? Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice was thunder, shaking the walls of my house. My mother stood beside him, her eyes cold, her lips pressed in a thin line. I tried to explain, my voice steady though my heart was racing. "I won't sell my home. I won't carry Rachel's debts anymore. This is my boundary, and you're going to respect it." But they didn't hear me. They didn't want to. My father called me selfish, ungrateful, a disgrace to the family. My mother accused me of betrayal, of abandoning them when they needed me most. The irony was so bitter it nearly choked me. They had never truly needed me. They had used me. Yet here they were, demanding loyalty, as though love was measured in dollar signs. Rachel stormed in not long after, as if the house were still hers to enter. Her hair was messy, her eyes wild with panic, and she carried an energy that filled the room with chaos. "Lily, you don't understand. People are after me. I can't fix this without you," she screamed, slamming her hand on the table. My heart broke a little in that moment, because part of me still wished she could see me as her sister, and not her bank. But all I saw in her eyes was desperation laced with entitlement. She didn't want me. She wanted what I could give her. The argument escalated, voices rising until the neighbors must have heard every bitter word. My father accused me of letting Rachel's life crumble. My mother said I had turned cold, like a stranger. Rachel sobbed theatrically, as though tears might melt my resistance. But I didn't bend. Instead, I said words that had lived in the back of my throat for years, words I had never dared to speak. "You've never protected me. You've never cared about me the way you care about Rachel. I've been nothing but your safety net, and I'm done being used." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. For a brief second, I thought my father might strike me. His fists clenched, his chest heaved, and his eyes burned with something darker than anger. But then he turned away, muttering, "You're not my daughter anymore." The words hung in the air, poisonous and final. My knees nearly gave out, but I forced myself to stand tall, even as my heart splintered into pieces. My mother didn't speak. She just glared at me like I was already a stranger. And Rachel? She looked at me with a mix of hatred and fear, as if I had destroyed the only lifeline she thought she had. When they finally left, slamming the door behind them, the silence in my house was almost unbearable. I sank to the floor, my body trembling, tears streaming down my face. I wasn't crying for the loss of them. I was crying for the little girl inside me who had always wanted to be loved the way Rachel was. That girl was gone now, replaced by a woman who finally understood the truth. Love given under conditions isn't love at all. its control, and I had severed the leash. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stared at the legal notice still sitting on the table. My signature felt like both a weapon and a shield. I had started a war with the people who were supposed to be my safe haven, but strangely, I felt freer than ever. I whispered into the quiet, "This is only the beginning," and though my voice cracked, I believed it. For the first time, I was not afraid of their disapproval. I was afraid of nothing, because I had already lost them, and yet, somehow, I had finally found myself. I thought the storm had peaked the night they left my house in fury, but I was wrong. A week later, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox, stamped with the cold authority of a courthouse seal. My hands shook as I opened it, the air around me suddenly heavy. My parents and Rachel had decided to escalate this war. They were filing a petition against me, demanding that I be forced to liquidate my assets for the good of the family. I sat frozen at my dining table, staring at the pages. It was surreal. They weren't just angry parents anymore. They were opponents in a courtroom battle. The betrayal cut deeper than any words could express. I had expected anger, guilt trips, maybe even threats, but dragging me into a legal fight, that was something I never thought they'd do. I picked up my phone, dialed the number of a lawyer I knew from work, and explained everything through a trembling voice. He listened in silence before saying, "Lily, this is serious, but it's also very telling. Parents don't sue their children unless desperation outweighs love." His words sank into me like a knife. Desperation outweighed love. That was the truth I had been running from all along. Rachel called me that night, not to apologize, but to gloat. "So, you've seen the papers? This is your fault, Lily. If you had just helped me quietly, none of this would have happened. Now, you've dragged us all into a mess." Her voice was sharp, almost gleeful, as though she enjoyed watching me suffer. I wanted to scream, to remind her that it was her debts, her reckless choices, that had led us here. But instead, I said something that surprised even me. "Rachel, you've mistaken me for your shadow, but I'm not here to follow you into your darkness anymore." She hung up, but I knew my words had hit her. The first court date loomed, and with it came sleepless nights. I would lie awake, replaying every childhood memory that now felt like evidence against me. I remembered birthday parties where Rachel got the bigger cake, the shinier gifts, the louder applause. I remembered times when I cried for attention, but was told to stop being dramatic. Each memory was a puzzle piece that formed the picture I had always avoided. I was never meant to shine in their eyes. I was meant to serve, to carry, to sacrifice. And now, for the first time, I was refusing. Walking into the courthouse was like stepping into a battlefield. The air smelled of paper, polish, and anxiety. My parents sat on one side with Rachel clinging to my mother's arm like a child, her eyes swollen from tears that I knew were more manipulative than sincere. My father wouldn't look at me. He kept his gaze fixed forward, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. I stood with my lawyer, a folder clutched in my hands, reminding myself over and over, I am not the villain here. But the weight of their stares made me question everything. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. His presence was commanding, his eyes sharp as they swept over the case file. He asked my parents' lawyer to present their argument first. The man spoke of family duty, of loyalty, of how a daughter should step up to save her sister. He painted me as heartless, cold, and detached from the very people who gave me life. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation, the lies echoing louder than my own heartbeat. Every sentence was a dagger, twisting deeper, making me wonder how they could distort love into such cruelty. Then it was my turn. My lawyer stood, his voice calm but firm, laying out the facts. My financial independence, my legal right to refuse, and the repeated history of me covering Rachel's mistakes. He spoke of the notice as an act of protection, not malice, reminding the court that I had every right to draw boundaries in my own life. As he spoke, I caught Rachel's eyes. She was glaring at me with pure hatred, her nails digging into her palms. My mother whispered in her ear, soothing her like a child, and the image nearly broke me. They still saw her as the fragile one, and me as the stone-hearted sister. The judge finally addressed me directly. His eyes softened just slightly as he asked, "Lily, is there anything you want to say in your own words?" My throat tightened, but I stood, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself. I told him my story, not the legal one, but the personal one. I spoke of years of sacrifice, of debts paid quietly, of love given without return. I said, I am not abandoning my family, but I cannot continue to abandon myself. The words spilled from me like a dam breaking, raw and trembling. The courtroom was silent when I sat down. As we left the building that day, the tension was unbearable. My parents avoided my gaze entirely, walking past me as though I were invisible. Rachel hissed under her breath, You'll regret this, Lily. I'll make sure of it. My knees almost buckled, but I straightened my back, lifting my chin. Because in that moment, I realized something powerful. They could take me to court. They could smear my name. They could even try to destroy me, but they could never own me again. The lines were drawn, and for once I wasn't afraid to stand on my side of them. The trial had only just begun, but its echoes followed me everywhere. My coworkers noticed the tension in my eyes, the fatigue in my smile, though I tried to hide it behind deadlines and coffee cups. But nothing could mask the dread that clung to me like smoke. One evening, as I walked to my car in the office parking lot, I noticed a man leaning against the hood of my sedan. He wasn't dressed like a lawyer or a friend. His eyes were sharp, restless, and full of something that made my stomach knot instantly. Lily Matthews? He asked, his voice a low growl. I froze mid-step. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket and waved it at me, though it wasn't an official document. Your sister owes a lot more than your parents are saying, and people aren't patient anymore. The way he said people made my blood run cold. He wasn't here for me. He was here because Rachel's debts had reached hands that didn't care about courts or family. I whispered that he had the wrong person, but he just smirked. No, I've got the right one. You're the one with money. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with questions. How deep was Rachel in? Who exactly had she borrowed from? And why did they think it was my responsibility to cover for her? I knew Rachel had always been reckless, but this wasn't maxed out credit cards or missed car payments anymore. This was darker. I replayed the man's smirk in my mind, the way he leaned close as if he already owned me. I knew one thing with certainty. Rachel wasn't just dragging the family into financial ruin. She was dragging us into danger. I tried calling Rachel the next morning, but she didn't answer. My parents picked up instead, their voices sharp and impatient. Why are you harassing your sister? My mother snapped. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. Harassing her? I wanted to scream that strangers were approaching me in parking lots because of her. I wanted to beg them to open their eyes and see the fire she was playing with, but I didn't. Instead, I simply said, Tell Rachel I need to talk to her. Urgently. My father muttered something about me being dramatic, and the line went dead. At work, I confided in my lawyer about what happened. His face darkened. This is no longer just a family matter, Lily. If these men are who I think they are, you need to document everything, and you need to consider police involvement. I nodded, but my heart sank. Police involvement meant scandal, investigations, headlines. My parents would never forgive me for dragging Rachel into something public. Yet, how could I ignore it? This wasn't about pride anymore. It was about safety, and mine was crumbling by the day. 2 nights later, it happened again. A different man, this one broader, angrier, caught me outside my building. He didn't waste time with introductions. He slammed his hand against the wall beside me and snarled, Rachel promised us payment. If she doesn't deliver, you will. His breath reeked of cigarettes and desperation. I tried to push past him, but his hand clamped around my wrist like iron. For a moment, panic blinded me. Then instinct took over. I shouted as loud as I could, and a neighbor stepped outside, phone in hand. The man vanished into the night, leaving me shaking on the steps. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house unannounced. Rachel was there, sitting at the kitchen table with her hair in disarray and her eyes red from sleeplessness. My mother rushed to block me at the door, but I pushed past her. Rachel, I said, my voice low and trembling with fury. Your mess is spilling into my life. Men are following me. Do you understand what that means? They think I'm your bank, and if I don't pay, they'll come back. Rachel looked at me blankly, then broke into tears. I didn't think they'd actually find you, she whispered. Her words sent a chill down my spine. She had known this was coming. She had known that sooner or later, her debts would reach me, and she had said nothing. My parents tried to soothe her, wrapping their arms around her like she was the victim. I stood there, stunned. They didn't see me shaking. They didn't see the bruise on my wrist. They only saw Rachel's tears, as though they were the only truth in the room. For the first time in my life, I realized I could be broken to pieces in front of them, and they still wouldn't look away from her. Driving home, I made a decision. I couldn't save Rachel from herself, and I couldn't save my parents from their blindness, but I could save myself. I picked up the phone, called my lawyer again, and said, "Prepare whatever we need. Restraining orders, police reports, anything. I'm not letting them destroy me." My voice didn't shake this time. It was steady, even defiant, and though I knew the storm was far from over, I felt something stir in me that hadn't been there before, the first spark of real freedom. The morning after my decision, I woke with a strange calmness in my chest. For weeks, I had carried fear like a weight pressed against my lungs, but now, choosing to act had shifted something inside me. I no longer felt like a cornered prey waiting for claws. I felt like someone sharpening their own blade. I spent hours gathering every message, every strange note, every trace of the men who had threatened me. My lawyer promised we would file a restraining order immediately, but his tone suggested what I already feared. The people chasing Rachel weren't easily stopped by paper. That week, the court sessions grew sharper, colder. My parents sat behind Rachel like stone guardians, refusing to glance at me. Rachel herself looked fragile, her makeup heavy, her hands trembling as she clutched her lawyer's notes. She played the victim beautifully, and part of me almost envied her ability to command sympathy, even when drowning others. My parents testified that I was selfish, that I had abandoned family values in my refusal to help Rachel. But when I rose to speak, I didn't talk about money. I talked about bruises, about shadows in parking lots, about the price of being their scapegoat. The courtroom fell silent when I described the man who grabbed me. I held my wrist high, the faint mark still visible, and said, "This is what your debt collectors think of me," as Rachel's replacement wallet. My lawyer placed photos of the notes they had slipped under my door. The judge's face tightened. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker across Rachel's mask. She avoided my eyes, chewing her lip, while my parents exchanged uneasy glances. The story they wanted the court to believe, that I was cruel and heartless, suddenly cracked beneath the weight of truth. After the session, as I walked down the courthouse steps, Rachel finally approached me. Her eyes were swollen, her voice a hushed plea. "Lily, please don't drag them into this. You don't know what they'll do if you keep talking." Her words slithered with fear, but also with a confession. She knew exactly who they were and what they were capable of. I stared at her, my chest pounding. "Then why did you let them follow me?" I whispered. Rachel's silence was louder than any answer she could have given. My parents pulled her away before she could say more. That night, I dreamed of Rachel as a child again. Messy curls, scabbed knees, her small hand in mine. I had always been her protector, her shadow shield. Even when she lied, even when she stumbled, I had defended her. But now, in the dream, her hand slipped free, and she turned to walk into a dark alley where faceless men waited. I called her name, but she didn't look back. I woke with tears on my cheeks, realizing that maybe Rachel didn't want to be saved anymore. Maybe she only wanted someone else to burn with her. The next day, the threats escalated. An envelope arrived at my apartment with no return address. Inside was a single photo. Me, standing outside the courthouse. On the back, in red ink, it read, "You're next, if she doesn't pay." My hands trembled as I showed it to my lawyer, who immediately contacted the police. But as I stared at the photo, a strange calm washed over me again. Fear had reached its peak. There was nothing left to do but fight. For the first time, I wondered if exposing Rachel's truth fully, her debts, her ties, her secrets, was the only way to free myself. When I told my parents about the photo, their response wasn't concern for my safety. My mother sighed and said, "If you had just helped your sister from the beginning, none of this would be happening." My father added, "You always make things worse by exaggerating." I stared at them in disbelief. I could have been murdered, and they would still find a way to make me the villain. Their blindness wasn't ignorance anymore. It was willful denial. In their eyes, Rachel could do no wrong, even as the world crumbled around her. Later that evening, my lawyer called me with news. The judge had agreed to review additional evidence of Rachel's financial ties, including testimony from the collectors if they could be traced. "This is your chance, Lily," he said, his voice firm. "If you want out, you have to let everything surface. No more shielding your sister. No more protecting your parents' illusions." His words struck deep. I realized that telling the truth might not just sever my family bond, it might obliterate it entirely. But wasn't that bond already shattered the moment they chose Rachel's survival over my life? By the end of the week, I stood in front of the mirror, staring into my own eyes. I saw exhaustion there, but also a spark I hadn't seen in years. My reflection whispered the choice I already knew I had made. I would speak. Not just for myself, but for the girl I used to be. The one who carried Rachel on her back, who believed love was enough, who thought parents always protected their children. That girl deserved to be free, even if it meant burning bridges that had never truly held me. And so, I whispered to the mirror, let the truth cut where it must. The day of testimony arrived with a heaviness that clung to my chest like a storm cloud refusing to break. The courthouse was packed, the echo of shoes on marble floors mixing with the murmur of whispered speculation. Rachel looked paler than ever, her hands shaking as she shuffled through papers she probably hadn't even read. My parents sat rigid beside her, glaring at me as though I were the executioner about to destroy their golden child. In truth, that wasn't my intention. My intention was survival. Mine. If my words cut Rachel open, it would only be because she left me no other choice. When the judge called me to the stand, my legs trembled, but my voice carried stronger than I expected. My lawyer had prepared me for hours, but what came out was less rehearsed speech and more raw truth. For years, I began, I have been told that my role in this family is to protect my sister, to carry her mistakes, to clean the blood she leaves behind. I turned my eyes to Rachel. But what happens when the blood isn't metaphorical anymore? What happens when her debts chase me into dark alleys? Gasps rippled through the audience. The judge leaned forward. Rachel shifted in her seat. I laid out the evidence one piece at a time. The threats, the notes, the photograph of me outside the courthouse. I spoke of the man who grabbed my wrist and hissed Rachel's name. And then, with deliberate precision, I revealed what I had kept locked in silence. Rachel hadn't just fallen into gambling by accident. She had tied herself to a known loan shark ring, one that laundered money through legitimate businesses. My lawyer placed the documented evidence on the judge's desk. The courtroom fell silent, except for Rachel's sharp intake of breath, her mask of innocence finally cracking. My parents stood as though struck by lightning. "Lies!" my mother shouted, her voice trembling with both fury and fear. "Rachel is not a criminal. She's sick. She's been manipulated." My father slammed his palm against the wooden bench, shaking his head violently, but I didn't falter. "They didn't manipulate her," I said, voice cold as stone. "She brought them into our lives, and when they couldn't squeeze her dry, she handed them my name." The words burned, leaving my lips, but it was a fire that finally felt purifying. The truth was no longer caged inside me. Rachel's eyes welled up, and for the first time, I saw something like true panic in her face. She whispered something to her lawyer, who looked pale, almost queasy. The judge asked Rachel to confirm or deny the accusations, and for a moment, silence stretched like a blade across the room. Then she broke. "I didn't mean for them to go after her," she cried, pointing at me with trembling fingers. "They said it was just leverage. They said they wouldn't hurt her if I kept paying." The courtroom erupted into chaos, voices rising, the judge's gavel hammering for order. It was in that chaos that the dam broke between me and my parents. My mother clutched Rachel, sobbing into her hair, while my father turned on me with eyes full of venom. "You did this," he hissed. "You destroyed your own sister." His words sliced into me, but I didn't flinch. Because in that moment, I saw the truth with absolute clarity. I hadn't destroyed Rachel. Rachel had destroyed herself, and they had chosen to blind themselves to it. My only crime was finally refusing to bleed on her behalf. For once, the burden was no longer mine. The judge recessed the court to review the evidence, but the damage had already been done. Reporters swarmed outside, their cameras flashing, their microphones thrust forward with questions about the family unraveling inside. I slipped out the side door with my lawyer, my chest heaving, adrenaline still burning through my veins. For years, I had been the silent daughter, the forgotten sister, the invisible shield. Now, I was the one speaking the words that could no longer be ignored. And for the first time, Rachel's power, the power she had wielded through lies and manipulation, was stripped bare. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the city lights. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from extended family, some praising me for bravery, others condemning me for betrayal. I ignored them all. My mind kept replaying Rachel's face when she confessed in front of everyone. There had been desperation there, yes, but also something darker. She hadn't been sorry for dragging me down. She was only sorry she had been caught. And that realization chilled me more than the threats ever had, because it meant this wasn't over, not by a long shot. When the night finally quieted, I poured myself a glass of water and whispered into the darkness, "You wanted me silent, Rachel. You wanted me broken. But I've spoken now, and there's no taking it back." My voice shook, not with fear, but with the gravity of what I had set in motion. The path ahead would not be easy. The legal battles were only beginning, and my parents' hatred would deepen. But the chain around my neck was gone. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. And whatever storm followed, I was ready to face it head-on. The next morning, I woke up to pounding on my apartment door. For a split second, I thought it was just reporters trying to squeeze a quote out of me. But when I opened it, a brick tumbled at my feet, wrapped in duct tape with a note clinging to it. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. "Family doesn't betray family. Watch your back." My stomach dropped. It wasn't from strangers. It was from Rachel. Somehow I knew it instantly. The loops of her letters, the vindictive sting of her words. She had traded her silence for vengeance, and I was the target. My lawyer urged me to report the incident, and I did, but the police only filed it as harassment with no immediate threat. They didn't see the years of patterns, the way Rachel's rage worked like acid, eating through anyone who tried to contain her. They didn't see the way my parents enabled her, or how far she was willing to go to protect her facade. To them, it was just family drama spilling over. But to me, it was a warning shot. The opening move in a new war she intended to wage, one without courtrooms or judges. That evening my parents called. I shouldn't have picked up, but curiosity gnawed at me. My mother's voice was sharp, desperate. "Lily, take it back. Retract your words in court. Do you understand what you've done? Rachel's falling apart." I laughed bitterly. "Falling apart?" She confessed. "You heard it with your own ears." My father cut in, cold and unwavering. "You destroyed her future. She'll never recover from this, and we will never forgive you." The line went dead. Their silence afterward was heavier than any scream. For them, Rachel's sins could be excused, but my truth was unforgivable. I sat in the dark, trying to understand how parents could choose a lie over their own daughter's survival. But then I realized it wasn't about truth or lies. It was about control. They had spent years sculpting the image of a perfect family, shielding Rachel's chaos, and I had shattered it in one public blow. They weren't defending Rachel anymore. They were defending themselves, their reputation, the fragile illusion they had forced the world to believe, and for that, they would sacrifice me 1,000 times over. Days later, I came home to find my apartment door ajar. My chest froze. Inside, nothing was stolen, but drawers had been yanked open, clothes tossed on the floor, photo frames shattered, and on my kitchen table sat a single object, the stuffed rabbit I had clung to as a child, one I thought had been lost decades ago. The sight of it made my blood run cold. Only my family could have retrieved it from the old house. Only Rachel would think to weaponize a childhood memory. It wasn't theft. It was a message. I can get inside your life whenever I want. I reported the break-in, but again, the police shrugged. "No signs of forced entry. Likely someone you know," the officer muttered. His words haunted me. Someone I know. My family had crossed a line I never believed they would. This wasn't about debts anymore. This was about erasing me, silencing me so thoroughly that no one would ever question Rachel again. My lawyer grew concerned, offering to help me file for a restraining order. But restraining orders were only paper shields, paper burns, and Rachel had always played with fire. In the sleepless nights that followed, I found myself rehearsing every possible scenario, moving to another city, cutting off all contact, disappearing completely. But the thought of leaving my life behind, running like a fugitive from my own blood, filled me with a hollow ache. Why should I be the one to lose everything? Why should Rachel and my parents strip me of the home, the friends, the freedom I had built? No, this time, I would not run. If Rachel wanted a war, then she would find me unshaken, ready to meet her at every turn. The next court session loomed, and tension thickened in the air like smoke. Rachel arrived looking disheveled, her eyes rimmed in red, but there was a glint of fury burning behind them. When our eyes met, she smirked, a smirk that told me the break-in, the threats, the brick, all of it had been hers. But she underestimated one thing. Fear had lost its grip on me. She had already shown me the worst she was capable of. Now, it was only a matter of time before the world saw it too. As I took my seat, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The storm had fully broken. There was no mending the pieces of what we once called family. There was only forward now, through fire and ruin, toward whatever truth remained on the other side. And as the judge raised the gavel, I whispered to myself, "You may have my past, Rachel, but you will not have my future." The sound of the gavel cracked through the air like thunder, sealing not just the session, but the final unraveling of blood ties that had bound me in chains for too long. The night before the final hearing, I woke to the acrid smell of smoke. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then I saw the orange glow flickering outside my bedroom window. Heart hammering, I rushed to the balcony and froze. The dumpster behind my building was ablaze, flames licking upward toward the stairwell. My neighbors were already spilling out into the street, shouting, calling the fire department. As the sirens grew closer, I noticed something chilling. Spray painted on the alley wall were the words, "Snitches burn." My knees buckled. This wasn't random. This was Rachel's war, now turned to ash and fire. The firefighters contained the flames before they reached the building, but the damage was done. Everyone in the neighborhood whispered. Some looked at me with pity, others with suspicion. I felt exposed, stripped of safety, as if Rachel's reach had crawled into every corner of my existence. When the officers questioned me, I could only shake my head. What proof did I have that my own sister was behind this? All I had were signs, echoes, scars she had left behind. And yet, deep down, I knew. She was escalating. And escalation meant one thing. She was running out of control. That morning, my phone buzzed with a message that made my skin crawl. A video. Shaky footage of my car parked outside the courthouse, its tires slashed, the windshield cracked. The camera panned up, and there was Rachel, smirking at the lens, her lips mouthing words I couldn't hear, but I could read them. "Next time, it's you." My chest tightened, my vision blurred. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was taunting me, daring me to crumble, daring me to back down before the final judgment was handed. But if she wanted to break me, she was too late. My lawyer, though horrified, grew determined. "This isn't just harassment anymore, Lily. It's intimidation. If we bring this to court tomorrow, the judge will have no choice but to see her for what she is." His words steadied me, but also weighed heavily on my chest. Tomorrow wasn't just about debts, or property, or even the years of favoritism. Tomorrow was about survival. If the judge didn't see the truth, if Rachel walked away unscathed, then I would have to live the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next brick, the next fire, the next knife in the dark. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the silence of my apartment, every creak of the floorboards making me jump, every flicker of headlights outside pulling me to the window. Memories of Rachel's cruelty flooded back, not just the recent years, but childhood. The way she used to twist my toys apart just to watch me cry. The way she once locked me in the basement and turned off the light, laughing at my screams. I had buried those memories, thinking time would dull them. But now they surged back, painting the truth. Rachel had always been this way, and my parents had always looked away. At dawn, I dressed slowly, deliberately, as though preparing armor for battle. A navy blazer, my grandmother's silver brooch pinned to the lapel, hair tied back neatly. I wanted Rachel to see me unshaken, no matter how broken I felt inside. As I grabbed my bag, I found a final envelope slipped under the door. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid, me, taken from behind as I walked into my building the night before. Written in thick black marker across the bottom, "You can't hide." My pulse roared in my ears. The war had reached its climax. When I entered the courthouse, the air felt heavier than ever before. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing, microphones shoved in my direction. I pushed through them, barely hearing the questions. Inside, Rachel sat flanked by my parents. She looked almost triumphant, as if the fire, the threats, the messages had already secured her victory. My mother refused to meet my eyes. My father stared at me with contempt sharp enough to cut. For a moment, I wondered if I was alone in this. Then I remembered, truth doesn't need an army, it only needs light. The proceedings began, the gavel striking like thunder. My lawyer rose, his voice firm, controlled, carrying every piece of evidence we had gathered. Rachel's confession from before, the threats, the video, the photographs. As he laid them before the court, the walls seemed to tighten, the silence growing sharper with every word. Rachel's smirk faltered, her eyes darting between the judge and my parents. My mother shifted uneasily, wringing her hands. My father's jaw clenched. The facade of family unity was cracking, the poison beneath spilling into the open for all to see. When the judge finally turned to Rachel, his voice was heavy, deliberate. "This court is not blind to intimidation, Ms. Bennett. Your actions, combined with your own words, paint a clear picture of coercion and abuse of trust. This is no longer about debts. This is about integrity, safety, and the rule of law." Rachel tried to protest, her words tumbling in desperate spirals, but the judge raised a hand, silencing her. In that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt a glimmer of justice beginning to rise, sharp, unyielding, undeniable. The courtroom was suffocating with tension as the final session began. Every eye in the room seemed to pierce me, but I held my chin high, heart hammering with anticipation. Rachel sat trembling, her makeup smudged, her hands folded so tightly that her knuckles were white. My parents appeared rigid, almost statuesque, as if carved from denial. The judge cleared his throat, and the sound echoed like a drumbeat through my chest. I felt the weight of months, years, pressing down on me, but I refused to flinch. This was the culmination of my truth against their lies. The judge reviewed the evidence, scanning Rachel's documents, the threats, the photographs, the recordings, everything we had painstakingly gathered. His expression remained unreadable for the longest time, and I could feel my own breath catch in my throat. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the corners of his mouth tightened as he leaned forward. "Ms. Matthews," he began, his voice even but firm. "Your courage in bringing this evidence to light has clarified what was obscured by family loyalty and fear. The court recognizes your rights and your boundaries." My heart lifted slightly. He paused and turned to Rachel, his gaze sharp, unyielding. "Ms. Bennett, your actions have endangered not only your own life, but that of your sister. Harassment, intimidation, and attempts to manipulate legal processes cannot be tolerated. The court finds you responsible for the consequences of your actions, including restitution for any damages incurred by Ms. Matthews, and a restraining order preventing further contact." Rachel gasped, her body slumping as though the air had been knocked out of her. My parents sat frozen, their faces masks of disbelief. A wave of emotion hit me that I hadn't expected. Relief, yes, but also sorrow. The battle had been won, but at what cost? Years of manipulation, lies, and favoritism could not be erased. My parents had chosen her over me for decades, and no legal ruling could restore the lost time, the missed moments, the scars that lingered. Still, as the judge continued, I felt a strange peace settling in my chest. Finally, justice had been acknowledged, even if imperfectly. The judge's words shifted, softening slightly as he addressed the family as a whole. "This court encourages reconciliation where possible, but it is clear that boundaries must be respected. Ms. Matthews is entitled to live free from intimidation, and the responsibility lies with Ms. Bennett and her parents to recognize that reality." My parents' shoulders slumped. They finally looked at me, eyes wet, lips pressed thin. There was guilt there, perhaps, or merely shock. For the first time, I realized they might truly see the cost of their favoritism. As we left the courthouse, I felt the sunlight like a cleansing wash over me. Reporters crowded for statements, but I refused to engage. This victory wasn't for the world to witness. It was for me. I felt lighter, freer than I had in years. I had faced betrayal, intimidation, and fear, and yet I stood whole. Rachel had revealed her true nature. My parents had glimpsed the consequences of their choices, and I had claimed my right to live on my own terms. Back at my apartment, I unpacked the small suitcase I had carried for court, every item now feeling like a symbol of reclaimed life. The walls, once crowded with memories of both love and pain, now felt like a sanctuary. I allowed myself to finally sit, closing my eyes and letting the tension seep away. For so long, I had been defined by their expectations, their manipulations, their debts. Now, I was defined by my choices, my courage, my refusal to let fear dictate my life. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. A message from Rachel, brief and trembling. I didn't realize. I read it, then deleted it without response. Some bridges, I realized, were meant to remain burned, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. I had survived, and survival demanded clarity, distance, and peace. My parents, too, would have to reckon with their actions alone. The past could not be changed, but the future, my future, was mine to shape. As I looked out the window at the city lights, I whispered to myself, I am free. And for the first time, I truly meant it. Every threat, every betrayal, every brick thrown, and every fire lit, they had tested me, pushed me to my limits, and yet here I was, unbroken. Justice had been served, not just in the courts, but in the reclaiming of my life. The weight of fear, manipulation, and family betrayal was lifted, and I knew without doubt that nothing and no one could take it away from me again. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heart-stopping real-life stories. Every week we share stories full of drama, family secrets, and twists no one saw coming. Click subscribe and join us for every shocking revelation.